They might as well say, "Do you hear this, Amberlynn?" I can understand why it was frustrating to hear me talk about the case like that, because I was real wrong. This is so obvious. Hello, my friends. So, when Tammy announced that she was going to be taking Amber to court, I was in the sort of mindset of regular defamation, where you have to prove that you've suffered some sort of damages because of what somebody said. And if we were dealing with regular defamation like that, I don't think Tammy's case would have a single chance of getting to court at all. And I made a video explaining that. And I was wrong, because after reading the comments, I kept seeing the same term pop up over and over again, and that was slander or defamation per se. And now after looking into it and kind of seeing what that is, I'm sort of realizing how wrong I was. Because this, again, as a dingus on the internet with no expertise in anything, it sure seems to fit what's happening between Tammy and Amber. Far better than what I was thinking. I'm sure a lot of you have already heard this, but just in case there's anybody out there that doesn't know what slander per se is, let's talk about it, because yeah, I think Amber might have a reason to be a little nervous. So if you'd like to like and subscribe, that would literally be hectic. I'm not gonna lie. Now, real quick before we get started, I want to say a couple things. Number one, I'm not a lawyer. This is not legal advice. And number two, I want to show that as far as I can tell, Oklahoma is a state that recognizes defamation per se. Now, this is Wikipedia, so take that for what it is, but it just says all states except Arkansas, citation needed, Missouri and Tennessee recognize that some categories of false statements are so innately harmful that they are considered to be defamatory per se. And we'll get into what that means in a minute, but the point of this is just to say that from what I can tell, Oklahoma does fall into one of the states that recognizes defamation per se. So it says that slander per se is a legal doctrine that allows a plaintiff to recover general damages without having to submit proof of any specific losses. Yeah, that's where I really made a mistake the first time, because I was thinking that she was going to have to prove that there was some kind of damage. The doctrine is based on the recognition that certain types of defamatory statements are so inherently harmful that damage should be presumed. There are 4 categories of statements that are typically considered to be slanderous per se. And there's only one that, well, maybe 2, but for sure one that would apply here, and that is statements that impute the commission of a crime. Now, I want to be clear that Amber didn't say Tammy did the things to the kids, right? But in Oklahoma, and this is definitions of child abuse and neglect, Oklahoma. This is from childwelfare.gov, the government site. Part of child neglect, it says a failure or omission to protect a child from exposure to any of the following, which would be illicit substances, blah, 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 and then sexual acts or materials that are not age appropriate. And just so you know, what Amber is alleging that Tammy did, I think would fall under the heinous and shocking neglect. Because right here it says, an act or failure to act by a parent that results in some bad things or emotional harm, sexual abuse or exploitation, or presents an imminent risk or serious harm to a child. And by Amber saying that Tammy knew it was going on and told them to lie about it, in my opinion, that's exactly what she's claiming Tammy did.
He is speaking to someone who stayed married to a PDF, someone who children. And you know what my aunt did? She forced these little kids to say that they were lying.
So while she was not claiming that Tammy did the things to kids, she is saying that by knowing about it and letting it happen anyway, she is committing a crime. So that absolutely falls under slander per se, I would think. And in a minute, we'll get into the fact that Amber is a public figure. Actually, I think plays even more of a part in that. But let's kind of keep going here. There was another one that says statements that accuse another of adultery or sexual promiscuity, which I don't think that would fit here because, again, she's not saying Tammy did the things. But if she starts saying that somebody's having an affair or whatever, I mean, she, I think, is biting off more than she can chew. No pun intended. And I just say that because she tends to say things about Mr. Snowflake and Jordy and stuff like that. And now that we know that defamation per se is a thing, well, I mean, you guys already knew. I'm a little tardy to the party. My bad. But yeah, I think she should be real careful before saying stuff like that. So down here it says, what distinctions make slander and slander per se different? But it says to break this idea down, it helps to know that there are two types of defamation claims. And remember, slander falls under defamation. One is defamation per se, and two is defamation per quad. And I looked up how to pronounce that, and it is per quad. unless Google is wrong, it's per quad. In a defamation per se case, the plaintiff does not need to prove how the statement in question harmed them because the damages are presumed. In a defamation per quad case, on the other hand, the plaintiff will need to allege how they were damaged by the statement in question at the start of a lawsuit. And per quad, I think, would fall under just like the regular defamation that we hear about all the time, you know. It is worth noting that plaintiffs should still provide some evidence of how they were harmed by a defamatory statement, even if it was defamatory per se. Although statements considered defamatory per se are presumed to be damaging to one's reputation, it does not automatically entitle the plaintiff to anything more than nominal damages. But it still entitles them to nominal damages, you know? So, I don't know, man. This sounds pretty cut and dry. And this is where it says, not all jurisdictions recognize defamation per se, but remember, Oklahoma does. And then it goes on to say that there are some states that actually broaden the definition of defamation per se with stuff like the plaintiff is a communist, et cetera, but that's in like California. Those are just some examples. And just so you know, this is coming from Mink Law, which is a law firm, you know, it's just their website. And again, I've got other forms that we're going to look at, so it's not just all getting it from one source. But we're just going to go through this one first. So we'll look specifically at accusing someone of a crime. The more specific the allegation, the stronger the defamation claim. For instance, if I say John D. robbed my house, he would likely have a stronger claim than if I merely said John D. committed a crime. And I would say what Amber said was pretty damn specific. You know, like she actually went.
Someone who, children.
Like, we know what you're saying, and we all clipped it, you know. In many states, this category of defamation per se requires alleging that someone committed a crime of moral turpitude. Yeah, that's exactly what happened. A crime of moral turpitude is an act that is considered contrary to community standards of justice, honesty, or good morals. In general, crimes of moral turpitude are those that shock the conscience or are considered inherently evil. I mean, they might as well say, do you hear this, Amberlynn? I can understand why it was frustrating to hear me talk about the case like that, because I was real wrong. This is so obvious. Yeah, damn, Amber is fucked. And this is from a website where you can find lawyers, and it's just sort of, if you need some basic information about law stuff. And it says basically the same thing, right? It says there are 4 main ways to classify false statements that the law presumes to be harmful to a person's reputation. And I kind of take that to mean that in the law's eyes, there are some things that somebody can say that the law is like, yeah, of course that's going to hurt somebody's reputation. Whether or not you can prove that it did doesn't really matter. It was clearly something that can. Generally, if a statement does not fit into one of the 4 categories, the plaintiff must prove their actual damages. So again, it's the same thing. Now this one says, saying that someone committed a crime or immoral conduct, which again, fits this pretty well, which may also involve a false police report. Now, when this was actually the first one that I read, and I was thinking immediately like, oh, I wonder if it means like you've called the police and said that somebody committed a crime. Like, you know, if somebody got arrested because of something you said, then that could be the defamation. But I don't think that's it. I think it's just because it says it may also involve a false police report. I don't think you need a false police report, and I don't think you need any authorities to be involved at all. Now, I found this interesting. It says standard of proof in defamation lawsuits. When a plaintiff files a civil lawsuit for defamation, they generally do not have to prove that the actor knew the statement was false when they made it. Which, that was my big question when I first started looking into defamation per se. I was like, yeah, that's great, but it would be pretty hard to prove that Amber knew it was false when she said it. Even if she did, it's hard to prove that. All she has to do is say, I didn't know. But it says they generally do not have to prove that the actor knew the statement was false when they made it. And then it says, but if the victim, now keep that in mind, if the victim is a public official or public figure, the standard is higher. If I say something that could be considered slander against, Ethan Klein or Amberlynn or something like that, they would have far more to prove than if I just said it about some random person, right? But here it's the opposite, right? It's a public figure talking about a non-public figure, which again just makes it so much worse for Amber. And then on top of everything else, it says to prevail in their case, a public figure plaintiff must prove that the defendant acted with actual malice. Now, here's the thing. Tammy is not a public figure, but she can absolutely prove that Amber acted with malice.
She forced these little kids to say that they were lying. So, Auntie, take that and fuck yourself.
Wow. This means the wrongful party either knew the statement was wrong or acted with reckless disregard for the truth. I mean, yes, that's exactly what happened. Oh my God. I understand I understand the frustration now with everybody being so mad about the video that I made. And I will be honest, when I first made that video and I started seeing the comments, I really thought people were just mad because I was saying that Tammy won't win. And I was like, guys, I'm just trying to be realistic, but God, I get it now. You guys are fucking right. This is so obvious. Oh man. Yep. My bad. Anyway, I just thought I would share this with you because as soon as I started reading it, I was like, ooh, yeah, that makes more sense. In the end, I should have looked this up sooner. Of course, now, to be fair, I had not heard this term at that point. So, yeah. Amber's fucked, you guys. Like, I don't know. And the only thing at this point that would stop the case from being an obvious win for Tammy is if Amber settles, which you better believe that a public apology will be required for a settlement. And on one hand, Amber is too stubborn to admit that she's done anything wrong. So I don't see her settling and giving a public apology. But at the same time, I think she's far too lazy to go get a lawyer and show up to a court date and do all the stuff that's involved in doing a trial. I just don't think she would ever do all that. So it's kind of like the unstoppable force of her stubbornness is going to meet the immovable object, which is like just her laziness, And then the other thing that might stop it is if it's just too expensive. So I did, on this Mink Law website, I looked how much does it cost for a defamation lawsuit. And of course, there's no way to know for sure, and this is for regular defamation from what I can tell. And I don't know if there's a difference, right? I don't know if they would charge less for a per se, or if maybe you don't need a lawyer for a per se because it's pretty cut and dry. But it says the average cost for a defamation lawsuit at Mink Law typically ranges from $15,000 to $25,000. If lawyers are going to be involved, there's no way you can get away with any less than $10,000, right? It's going to be in the tens of thousands of dollars at minimum. So yeah, this is one of those wait and see sort of things. There's no way for us to know until we hear from Tammy or until the lawsuit is filed and becomes public information, if that ends up happening. But I would still guess that talking about it a bunch online probably won't help her case any. Even though she doesn't really have to prove damages to her reputation, it probably just isn't a good look to go on and just act like everything's totally hunky-dory, you know? I'm not sure it can be used against her, but it just doesn't look like you've been harmed, you know? I don't know, but I think just to be on the safe side, she should probably just not talk about it online. And then I looked up, do you need a lawyer for defamation per se? Just to kind of see if you really need one, and it was not very helpful, you know? It was just like, you don't have to, but it'd be best if you did, kind of thing. So thanks, Google. That was helpful. So I will remain cautiously optimistic because you just never know, man. She could go into a lawyer's office and they could say any number of things that would ruin everything for us, or, you know, there could be a detail that we're missing that we don't know, or, you know, it also just depends on the judge. Some judges just don't give a shit. So you just never know. You never know how it's going to turn out. But I mean, it doesn't look good for Amber, you know? So yeah. Anyway, so yeah, I thought I would just share this with you because I thought it was interesting. And we'll see how this plays out. I appreciate you guys so much. I'll see you in the next one. Take care.